Right now, you are not seeing the present. Your brain finished assembling this moment a fraction of a second ago, and it was already editing before it let you look. The popular idea is that your eyes are cameras and your brain just watches the footage. That isn't how vision works. What you experience as seeing is closer to a render, predicted, its gaps filled in, and quietly given the wrong timestamp. And you can't feel any of it happening. The edit is seamless by design. A brain that let you notice the seams would be a brain that hesitates, and a perceptual system that hesitates is slow to act. So the editing runs below awareness in two directions at once: forward, predicting what is about to happen, and backward, rewriting what just happened. Over the next few minutes, we'll catch it 3 times with a missing patch, a displaced flash, and a frozen clock. By the end, you'll have made your own brain do it. Start with something missing from each eye on its own. Where the optic nerve leaves the back of your eye, there are no light receptors at all. It is a blind spot, bigger than you'd expect. With both eyes open, you never notice it, because each eye covers the other's gap. But close one, and it is there. Try it. Cover your left eye. With your right eye, look at a cross on the left of the screen, and slowly bring your face closer. At a certain distance, the dot on the right simply vanishes. It has fallen into your blind spot. This is the normal blind spot every eye has, where the optic nerve exits, not sudden vision loss, and your brain has quietly filled the gap. Now here is the part that should unsettle you. Your brain doesn't leave that gap empty and move on. It fills it in with its best guess at what belongs there. Put the blind spot over a striped pattern, and you don't see a break in the stripes. You see stripes, continuing straight through a region where your eye is sending no information at all. Ramachandran and Richard Gregory demonstrated this in 1991, using artificial blind spots. The brain paints over the missing patch with the surrounding texture, and the natural blind spot is the everyday version of the same trick. It is not a photograph. It is an interpolation, a fabrication so seamless you would never catch it without a test like this. And it isn't only the blind spot. In illusions like the corn-sweet effect, 2 regions of identical physical brightness can look completely different, because your brain reads a surface from its edges, not from the raw light. So vision fills in space it doesn't have. The second thing it does is stranger. It fills in time it hasn't lived yet. Light hits your retina, but turning that light into a conscious image takes time, roughly 1/10 of a second. That is a problem. 1/10 of a second is long enough for a thrown ball or a predator to move. If your brain simply showed you the world as the light arrived, with no correction, you would always be a beat behind. So watch this. A dot moves steadily across the screen, and at the instant it passes the center, a second dot flashes exactly level with it. Same position, same moment. But that is not what you see. You see the moving dot already ahead of the flash. This is the flash lag effect, and the obvious explanation is tempting. The brain extrapolates. It estimates where the moving object should be by now and shows you that, compensating for its own delay. Rajiv Nijhawan proposed this in 1994. In a limited sense, the visual system reaches slightly ahead of real time. It is a clean story. It is also probably not the whole truth. In the year 2000, David Eagleman and Terence Sednowski offered the opposite account called postdiction. The brain doesn't run forward, it waits. The flash opens a brief window. The brain gathers what happens just after it, then reaches back and decides, after the fact, where everything was when the flash occurred. Prediction reaches forward, postdiction reaches back. After more than 25 years, the debate is still unsettled, and the strangest possibility is that perception uses both. Even the experts can't agree on which way the edit runs through time. Hold that question. The next illusion won't settle it, but it shows the brain editing time in the most direct way there is, using your own eyes. Your eyes are not a camera gliding smoothly across a scene. They jump in quick involuntary flicks called saccades, several times a second. During each jump, the image smears across your retina like a photo taken from a moving train. You should see that blur constantly. You never do. Because around each jump, your brain turns the visual feed down, dampening vision from about 50 to 100 milliseconds before your eyes move, and briefly after they land. The smear is suppressed before it ever reaches you, which forces the brain to answer a question. If vision dims every time the eyes move, what fills that missing slice of time? Here's its answer, and you can run this one yourself. Find a clock with a ticking second hand on a wall or on your phone. Look away, then snap your eyes back to it. For a moment, the first tick seems to last too long. The second hand appears to hang, frozen, before it moves on. That is chronostasis, the stopped clock illusion. Keelan Yarrow and his colleagues measured it in 2001. People genuinely overestimate that first interval after an eye movement, and the larger the movement, the longer that first moment seems to stretch. Their explanation is quietly astonishing. To cover the gap left while your eyes were moving, the brain takes what it sees after the jump and backdates it, as though you had been looking at it a moment earlier than you actually were. It fills the missing time by pretending the present arrived early. The frozen second hand is that borrowed time made visible. Step back and look at what these three share. Spatially, your brain invents detail that was never on your retina. In time, it reaches forward to cover its delay and stitches backward to hide its own blindness. It is the same editor, working in both directions with one goal: to give you a world that feels seamless, immediate, and complete. And none of those three things is quite true. The seamlessness is painted over gaps. The immediacy runs a fraction of a second late. The completeness is a confident guess. You are not watching reality as it happens. You are watching the only edit your brain ever lets you see, finished before you started looking. In a precise sense, you have never seen the present moment. This idea is older than the laboratory. Back in the 1860s, Hermann von Helmholtz argued that perception is a kind of unconscious inference, the brain's best guess at the hidden causes of what the senses report. Modern neuroscience has built that intuition into a working framework called predictive coding. The brain constantly generates a model of the world and corrects it against the gap between what it predicted and what the senses send back. The philosopher Andy Clark and the neuroscientist Anil Seth capture it with a phrase worth pausing on: that ordinary perception is a kind of controlled hallucination, a model kept in check by reality rather than a recording of it. It is a metaphor, not a claim that normal sight is a delusion. And it is a model, not a settled verdict, one that careful scientists hold lightly. But the illusions themselves are not in doubt. You can run them tonight. And once you have felt your own brain fill a gap, predict the position, and freeze a clock, that comfortable certainty that you are simply seeing what is there never quite returns, which may be the closest any of us gets to seeing clearly.